Like, hey, everybody. So we are doing our second group live, and today it's going to be over just really analyzing rentals. And we have Becky here, and I'm super excited to have her here because I know she's got a group that is very similar to ours, that this is basically kind of what they teach. And she just acquired her 10th door. When did you close on that one?
September 30th.
Okay. So, and that's been 2 years, I think is.
Yeah, it was just over 2 years since I got involved in real estate.
So she's going to introduce herself, and then she is going to just kind of go over like what her background is, what she's been doing in real estate. So you can take the wheel.
Well, thank you. Thanks so much for having me. I'm so happy that we finally get to do this and connect. So hi, everybody. I am Becky Nova. I always explain to people I am a cancer researcher by day and a real estate investor by night. I've been in cancer research now for about 15 years, but I always tell people that there are kind of two sides to life. I actually quit cancer research back when I was in my mid-20s. I moved to Europe. I used to own a tour company in Spain. I then moved and expanded into Portugal. I owned a bar in Portugal. And then I had a bus that took people from Spain from my tour companies in Spain to my bar in Portugal and then back the other way.
That's so cool.
It was like the most fun thing I've ever done in my life. And actually I made really good money on it. But the bar that I bought in Portugal, it was a really bad business decision. I lost a ton of money on it. And I moved home to the States when I was like 30 years old, like totally penniless, and moved back into like my parents' apartment, like my parents' house because I had no money. My goal.
Everything's
funny. It is. I learned so much from it. People all the time are like, "Oh my God," but like you lost this, kind of international business. And I'm like, yeah, but then you just kind of learn, pick up the pieces and figure out what's next. So I went back to cancer research actually. For a little while just to kind of make some money. And I then started a medical consulting company. I had that medical consulting company for years, and I'd met my now husband. But as my boyfriend, he is my husband, Emilio. He's actually an immigrant to the United States. He moved here from the Dominican Republic about 10 years ago. And it was a really big goal of his, that American dream. He wanted to be a homeowner. And I had no desire at all to actually own a property. I had never lived anywhere for like more than a year. So I thought this was like owning property and like being in it forever just scared the crap out of me. So I was like, okay, if we're going to buy a property, like we got to figure out how to do this where we're not just living paycheck to paycheck just to pay the mortgage. So I always tell people I came up with this fantastic idea. We were going to buy a multifamily, and we were going to live in one side and rent out the other. And I thought was like, how is nobody else doing this? This is such a great idea. I had no idea. I had no intention of this ever becoming a thing. So we ended up buying a duplex. We live in New York. So we definitely had to go through the experience of what the market in New York City is like.
Yes.
So we'll talk more about that in a little bit. But we ended up purchasing a duplex. And once we closed on that, that was May 2018. Once we closed on that, I was like, oh my God, when can I buy another building? Like, when can I buy something else? This is amazing. And it was after that, just asking people like, how do I buy another property? Like, does anybody do that? Like, how do we buy it? That's when I found out actually about your group. So I've been in your group now for probably for about a year and a half now. Yeah. I found that I never heard of Bigger Pockets. I found that group. That's when I realized what house hacking was. And I was like, oh, okay. I was like, because it wasn't me that was just so creative to come up with something, but okay, fine. So we had bought that one, and then it just kind of snowballed from there. And then it's just become how to figure out how to grow a portfolio. And I feel like we've kind of ended up doing that in a little bit more of an untraditional way. So that I feel like that's something that like I could definitely kind of share a little bit more about too. About how we ended up kind of growing our portfolio, because like I said, we kind of fell into this. I know a lot of people do, but we definitely did.
How many do you have in New York? How many doors?
So we have 9 out of 10.
Oh, okay. Okay. I was thinking that you had more, and you've got some in the Dominican Republic, correct?
Yes, we have an apartment down there. So my husband thought it was really important to be able to buy where he was from, and we did not do the short-term rental. Everybody's like, "Oh, that's so cool! You must own on the beach." And I'm like, "No, we own in the middle of a really large city." But so we
Do you guys like, I don't know if they have Airbnb down there, but do you basically rent it out when you're not there?
So we do not Airbnb it. It is rented out to locals. It is not a place where it's not a place where tourists would really go. It is definitely a locals area, and it's actually, we have 2 college students living there.
Oh, okay.
So it's a long-term rental.
That if you wanted to go down, that you could stay in it.
No, we were able to, when we first bought it, we went down, and because we decided last year to go down for like the Christmas, New Year's holidays, which is really, really big in the Dominican Republic. I mean, it's big everywhere, but it's a very big party fun time in the Dominican Republic. So we went down. So we found, since they were students that were renting it, we lived there for like the 3 weeks between their winter break. So
Cool.
we really got to go and stay there for free, which is kind of the idea.
Yeah.
But no, it's a long-term rental. It's a year lease. You know, that's kind of how it works there. That is going to be our next purchase. Our next purchase is going to be the beach Airbnb rental. We're going to try where we can live there. Katie, you're invited anytime you want. Come on down. But that's going to be, this is definitely going to be the place where we're going to be able to go for a couple months out of the year, or at least we're booking our weekends first and then renting it out when we're not there. That's the next property.
Yes. Okay, so if you will walk us through kind of, I mean, I guess number one, how you pick the location of where you want to be in, and it sounds like you have them in New York, which is where you are right now, but how do you pick the neighborhoods and the price point and everything of where you actually buy?
Sure. I am very big about figuring out where opportunity is and just kind of going with it and making sure that like I'm completely open-minded to things that come my way and listening to all opportunities and then working with what actually works. So for example, when my husband and I decided to buy the first property, we were living in the Bronx. Most people know the Bronx. It is in New York City. It is one of the boroughs. So most people do know that. What you might not know from not being in that area is the Bronx is really the only undeveloped borough. So a lot of people a couple of years ago, all of a sudden were like, wow, like let's go find some of these areas that they're really kind of going through the gentrification process right now. So that happened in Brooklyn many years ago when like the whole hipster revolution started and people are making like boatloads of money out there. So where we were in the Bronx, we noticed that trend was kind of starting. So it was our plan to actually buy in the Bronx and kind of be a part of that wave. We got blown out of the water. Nobody cared about our little piddly, 5% down on a property. No one cared. We were competing against all of these like international buyers that were coming in. I remember this one place we went to go look at. It was not in a comfortable neighborhood. My husband and our realtor actually already met me there. I had to walk from the subway there. And I was like, I don't really know if I feel comfortable like doing this. And I don't say that about a lot of places. Once again, I've lived in multiple countries. I've lived in bad neighborhoods, but I was like, I don't think I could do this every day. We get there and it's the middle of winter. So in New York, it's freezing cold. And and we're the only people at the open house. And I'm like, oh, see, this one will go better. We're not competing against anybody. And my husband and my realtor just started laughing. And they're like, did you not notice like the town cars, the Range Rovers, the Mercedes, like right here in this like horrible part of the Bronx? Like you didn't see those? And I was like, no, they were all, then all of a sudden the open house starts. And then all the drivers get out and let out these like women in like, pink coats to the floor, it was all these cash buyers. And they went and they were just picking up these places for like $100,000 over ask in cash, like overnight. And we were just not able to compete.
We were asked 100,000 over asking.
We lost one property that we found that was really like, when you're trying to buy your forever home, not the rental property, but the forever home, you kind of go through that, like you just start getting a little desperate and you start sacrificing things and you're like, okay, well, that's not the amount of bedrooms we needed, but we'll make it work. Oh, I don't really like how that kitchen works, but like, I'll make it work. But like, you just kind of start sacrificing. We had sacrificed a ton on this place and convinced ourselves it was great. It was not. And I'm happy we didn't get it, but we lost the bidding war by like $180,000.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
But this is
So
what's crazy here, what's going on in our market, and like that's insane. That's
yeah,
insane.
we were just like, okay, this process is clearly not working. Where it's going to be very difficult to kind of compete here. What do we do? So it was actually our realtor who brought up the idea of, hey, maybe we need to look outside of the Bronx.
Yeah.
The problem is outside of the Bronx, taxes are incredibly high. So he
Oh,
was like, listen, you're looking for a rental property though. So if we can find a place, even if the taxes are 15 grand, if it still is covered by what the rental units have, who kind of cares? Who cares if it's
yeah.
5,000 or 10,000 if somebody else, if your tenants are paying that rent and it still cash flows? So we were like, okay, fine. So he actually, our realtor found us a place. It's actually about 10 minutes north of the Bronx in Yonkers, New York, which is also a huge city. It's the fourth largest city in New York.
Okay.
Like I said, it's a 10-minute walk from the Bronx. So I can literally walk
It
there in the
isn't bad
morning
at
if I
all.
want to. No. So we're right outside the city still. And we found a property there. My husband went to go see it. I actually did not even get to see it. We put in the offer and got it. So for me, it was still sight unseen. So there ended up being another offer that was already put on the place. And my husband, and they came back and said, okay, best and final offer. I swear to God, my husband had like a total panic attack because this to him was exactly what had happened so many times to us before. And he's like, no, I'm not doing this. I'm done with these best and finals. We're not going to get this place. And I'm like, but it's just us and this one other set of people. We should be able to do this. Let's go. So we ended up getting that place. I came up, I saw it that night for the first time, absolutely fell in love with it. So it's a two family.
Okay.
So since it's just my husband and I, we were actually able to take the smaller apartment. So we live in the one bedroom that has the backyard space, and we rent out the upstairs apartment, which is actually a 2-floor. So that's a duplex apartment. That's 3
Wow.
bedrooms and 1.5 baths.
Wait.
So
Is the other one that you rent out 2 floors, or the duplex is one on the bottom, one on the top?
no, so the upstairs apartment is 2 floors.
Crazy.
Very interesting. We think it used to be a 3-family, but
Okay.
then it was just when it was, so we bought it from a flipper, oddly enough.
I've
So
seen that. I've seen that actually in DC, where they like you'll have a basement thing that's not really a basement,
yeah.
and then they section off and they make them 3 levels, or they add on up top. Because my cousin used to live in DC, and I went and looked at a bunch of properties out there, so I could write it off on my taxes. And I was like, it's totally different, completely and totally different. And I was fascinated with like kind of what the laws were too on how to build out certain things and how you could just cut something in half. Like it was cool.
It was very, and actually when we were kind of digging into this place, we realized that actually that upstairs duplex was zoned for a commercial space. Somebody had submitted the permits to turn the first floor of the duplex into a daycare and then live on the top floor.
Okay.
So it was just interesting how it was really kind of broken up. So anyway, we ended up winning the house. So I always love to tell this part too, because people just think this story is great. But we were so nervous then that somebody else was going to come in and give an accepted and make a higher offer than us and outbid us, and that we were going to lose the house. I didn't sleep like all weekend waiting for the inspection. We get to the inspection Monday morning. And I was coming up from the city because I was coming from my job, and my husband got here first, and he just sent me a message and he goes, "We have a problem." And I was just like, I was distraught. I was like, "What do you mean we have a problem? What is this?" And he sends me a picture. Apparently over the weekend, the house had been graffitied and vandalized. It had been, someone took, it's a brick townhouse. Somebody, I'll send you pictures later. I can't post them, but I'll send them to you later. But somebody wrote in bright orange spray paint, racial epitaphs all over the property. So we clearly called
insurance for that.
and it's not our house yet. So now we're in this weird situation where it's not our home, but now it's vandalized. We're trying to do the inspection. We're like, what's going on? Like, and it just didn't make sense. So we call our realtor. He calls the other realtor. They feel clearly horrible. They're all freaking out. Like, who would do this? Like, why? Like, where did this kind of come from? It was just so random. So we come through. Of course, I made the worst mistake ever of telling my mother about this. My mom's like, "Get out! Don't go there. That's it. You're gonna find another home. Like, leave. Like, don't go. Don't buy this house at all." We still decide, okay, we're still gonna go through with it. So we do the home inspection, and right as we get finished the home inspection, the police officers show up.
Oh,
So because now it's the vandalism, right? So we meet. So now we have the Yonkers Police Department shows up about this. They're now asking us questions about it. Then the fire department shows up to power wash off the spray paint using their hose, which I was like, that's kind of creative. So they're trying to do that. All the neighbors come out. We end up meeting everybody. Come to find out that one of the neighbors had a camera of it, and it was actually the other couple that lost the bidding war.
Stop.
Were trying to scare us away from buying the house.
Oh my gosh. Did they get in trouble for it?
See, since we're not the owners, we don't know. We weren't able to follow up with like the police or the case because we have no right to know that. So
Wow.
we were kind of told though that probably the sellers weren't going to care too much about prosecuting because they were flippers. They just wanted to end this. They just wanted to sell the house and move on.
But it all got cleaned up and it was easy to clean it all up.
You can still see like a speck or two if you look closely of like orange spray paint on my brown door. And like every once in a while, like I'll think of that as like the beginning of this journey. And just kind of like, you know, when I'm having a bad day about something going on with real estate, like I'll kind of just like go out and like look at it and be like, there's been worse things. You've had hideous words written on your front door. Like, you know what? You can kind of get through anything, Becky, if you got through that. So
I mean, that's honestly a really awesome story because how much trouble you guys went through just to get this house, and then it was spray painted like that, and that's what started your journey. And now you have 10 doors.
So that started this house. Then once again, you make mistakes. You don't always know what you're doing at the beginning, right? So we then went through, long story short, we did not pick necessarily the right attorney or the right lawyer. There ended up being
that's for the closing, right?
For the title.
Okay.
Yeah, we
have title here in Texas, so I don't know anything about attorneys or what you do.
Sure. So yeah, we have to use an attorney and we have to use a title company. So I did not pick the best ones of those. We ended up there ended up being things at the walkthrough. We noticed that there was a leak in the property, so we told our attorney. The seller at the closing was just like, sure, not a problem. I'll have that stuff fixed. So we were like, okay. And our attorney was perfectly fine with us. Our attorney was perfectly fine with us closing. So I didn't think anything about it, you know, and I didn't think anything about it. I didn't know. So we had that. The one thing that I was worried about was at the closing, all of a sudden my mortgage payment on the documents I'm signing was like twice as much as what we originally agreed to. And I'm like, I'm sorry. And my attorney's like, oh, just sign it. And I'm like, no. No. I am not signing this. Like, why is this high? No one could give me an answer. Long story short, we close. Now the seller is like, well, I'll have my handyman come and fix the leaks. And the handyman's like, no, you need a plumber. I can't do this. So we ended up with about $7,000 worth of damage on the property that we had to now fix. My husband was like destroyed that his American dream to finally have a homeownership. And we have like water, like what they ended up doing, flippers that are watching, do not do this. If you were on the 4th floor or the 3rd floor or the 2nd floor, do not just take the drywall that you demoed and try to flush it down the toilet. That does not work. Yep. So that caused a leak, which then was why my payment was twice as high as it was because the title company missed a $7,000 water bill. Yep. That then became a lien on the taxes.
Why didn't the seller have to pay that?
They were, but the title company never picked it up. They didn't notice it. So didn't require the seller to do it. And then it got pushed onto us. So we ended up getting that sorted out with title. I then had the title company, they had to eat the $7,000 water bill. Not my problem. I didn't pay a penny for that. And then we actually ended up suing our attorney for not putting money in escrow for not putting any money on the escrow for the leaks and the clogs that the seller said he would fix, but then never ended up fixing. So
awesome start. Okay.
But I was still like, I love this. I was like, this I can do. Like, I don't know why, but even with that, I like being a problem solver. I like kind of figuring out like what the next solution was. So this to me, I was like, these are all things that are manageable. Let's go. So as soon as then we got, all the drywall out of the toilet plumbing, we then were like, okay, let's go buy the next one. So,
It's funny because when I do transactions, because I work with a lot of investors, if I have a couple going at a time, I always have one that's literally a complete shit show. Like I'm like, I can't handle. Don't call me anymore on this thing because every time you call me, there's something wrong. And then I always have this one that's like smooth, and I have anxiety over it because I'm
yeah,
like, something has to be
problem.
wrong. What's wrong? Like something has to be wrong. And
So
that's just how real estate is. Like there's always going to be something
there's
wrong.
always something.
You're always going to be learning.
So don't ever have me as a client then, because I've used, so the three multifamilies I've bought in New York, I've actually used the same realtor all 3 times to find the
Okay.
cash flowing properties, which has been great. But he always is like, I always like hyperventilate when I see your phone number because
Yeah.
he's like, your transaction, out of all my transaction, there's always the biggest problem with yours. So,
Gosh.
but I'm sure when he gets his commission check, we work it out and are fine.
Yeah.
So that was our first property. Once we got settled with it, I was like, okay, let's figure out how to buy the second. And that's when I really started diving in to the women's group and asking questions and reading what other women were doing. That's when I really dove into other people's podcasts and Bigger Pockets and all that stuff. And I really was I was so close to buying property out of state. It was something that I like narrowed down my markets. I knew where I was buying. I identified my team players. I checked all the boxes. And then I got a call from my realtor who said, hey, I know you wanted to buy another property. I think I got one. And I was like, what do you mean? He goes, well, it's an off-market property, really close to where you're currently living. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, so it might work out for you, but I need you to go get pre-approved. I can't tell you anything else about it. So I said, all right. So I was like, cool. So I'm calling my mortgage broker and I'm like, I need to know about this property. Meanwhile, my husband sees our broker coming out of the house across the street from us.
That's how he figured it out.
And was like, hey, I bet that's the house we're going to buy. So we did get pre-approved and that ended up being the property. Apparently, since this is a small neighborhood where we now are in Yonkers, when our realtor was here doing the appraisal, the little old lady from across the street came over and was like, hey, knocks him on the shoulder. Hey, I don't know who you are. I've lived here for 30 years. I don't know who you are. What are you doing in this neighborhood? So he explained, that the house was being sold and he was a realtor. And little old lady said, hey, I'm actually thinking about selling my property. Stay in touch. So we did. And we ended up buying then a 4-plex across the street.
That was hers?
Yeah, that was hers.
Oh, that's cool.
Yep. And it's literally like I wake up, I open like my curtain in my bedroom and I look at our other property and I'm like, this is so cool.
How far is the quadplex?
Literally across the street.
Oh, so
right
the
there.
one that he was not the one he was coming out of, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, the one he was coming out of was a quadplex.
Was a quadplex. Yep.
Wow. Okay.
It's a quadplex with a parking lot, which in New York, that means a lot.
New York is huge. I do know that.
Yes. In New York, that is like, we always tell people that we actually just bought the property purely for the parking lot.
Well, is it the same thing? Because I know DC is this way, that if you have a backyard, that it's, I don't, because I know in DC, because my cousin, he lives there. And
I lived in DC. Yeah.
He had like a little driveway and that was his parking space. And when I went and looked at other properties, they had it in there where you had to pay like $75,000 or $100,000 or whatever for one parking spot. And I'm like, what?
And that's DC. I'm talking New York. I mean,
is that the same thing in New York?
Price for, here in New York, like parking is just mad expensive. That's just the way it is. Once again, we're not in Manhattan, so that makes it a little bit easier. But where we are, parking is incredibly difficult. It's still city-like. It is still not enough parking here. And the street we live on, the whole neighborhood, they're all old townhouses, like brownstones from the 1900s. So there's no parking because there were no such thing as cars when these houses were built. We do have the alleyway that Liana's talking about. Like, and just like you're saying, Katie, like over in DC, we do have an alleyway behind it, but it's too narrow to be able to get a car in. I was actually going to buy like a Vespa purely so I can like park, like take that down the alleyway and then like just park that in my backyard. But my husband didn't really like that idea, especially because it also gets cold here. So
Yeah.
no Vespa for me. I got a smart car instead, so that I could park that actually in my backyard if I wanted to. But now we have a parking lot.
So when you're running your numbers, like on the quadplex, I'm assuming that you have to run like what rent is going to be. Mm-hmm. And then I'm also assuming that you have to calculate in that they pay extra for parking. Like,
yes.
Do you get to charge them more for parking?
Yes. So actually that worked out really well for us, since they are across the street and the duplex that we first bought has no parking. We actually give our tenants in both buildings a discount if they get the parking when they sign the lease.
Okay.
So we do not include it in the lease. And we always tell people too, we don't include it in the lease because let's say someone doesn't actually have a car, or we're right by a large train station here. So technically you don't need to, but everybody has cars where we are. So yes, so we actually do extra if you do not have it, if you want the parking, and we do that for both buildings, which is really nice to be able to have. And then also outside of that, we are able to rent to other people in the neighborhood. Oh. So we give our tenants a discount compared to other people that just need parking.
How big is your parking lot? How many spaces does it have?
I think we could fit about 12.
Oh, okay.
And we were trying to figure out actually how to like make that a little bit bigger too. We went out there with like a measuring tape and we're trying to figure out like the best way to be able to get cars in there for the most amount of spaces.
Yeah.
So
man, that's like parking stuff. I mean, it reminds me of, when you have an apartment complex, that the more, you can charge for parking, you can charge for whatever else that you want to like add on to it. And it raises the value of that apartment complex by charging certain things to make the income more, basically. So that's almost the same thing.
So in New York, things like that I find this always funny, especially in your group, that like when people talk about things like being in different states, like I can always tell kind of where people are. Because here, yes, in New York, we can charge more for parking. In other states, you can't do that. In New York, we could charge more for a washer and dryer.
Yeah.
Which other people are like, no, but every home has a washer dryer. Not in New York. We also, one of the other ways that we can get extra rent too, is backyard space.
Yes. Okay.
Because to have a backyard or a balcony, or even to be able to like go out on a like a fire escape, like even that for like a New Yorker is like the coolest thing ever. And we will pay for that extra space, especially now during a pandemic when people weren't able to go anywhere. Being able to have a place with a little bit of a backyard is huge for people that live in urban areas.
Okay, so
I see your whole mind spinning, Katie.
I know. So I'm trying to think, when you're looking at these properties and you're going through and you're analyzing them from what the purchase price is going to be, did the parking lot come with it already in the price, or was that extra that you could just buy with it?
No, it came with it.
Okay. So when you were running your numbers, kind of tell us what that looked like.
Sure. So when I was running my numbers, that property was a little bit different. And here's why. One, yes, it was off market. It was a price, even though it was an off market deal, which meant we can't really negotiate on it. We were able to get it for a little bit of a lower price because the people that had lived there, that little old lady, well, she was a little bit of a hoarder. So every inch of that property was covered with something.
She didn't rent out the other units?
Oh, no, she did. I have no idea how those other tenants live there. You couldn't even walk down so once again, it's a quadplex. So you have that main stairwell, right? I just want to make sure everybody else can imagine this. You have that main stairwell and you just have apartments on all 4 floors. There were people living in all of them. And some people had lived there for 10, 15 years. Trust me, the rents were like totally off. They made no sense. There was no rhyme or reason to how they came up with rental prices at all. People lived there for years, but you had to like turn sideways and like scoot yourself down like the hallway to get down and up the stairs.
Just from her stuff?
from all of her stuff.
Oh my God.
Yep. So, and not only that, but there also had been no upkeep really to the building for about 30 odd years. So when we bought it, we clearly looked and made sure, like, okay, what can we do for the people that are still here? What can we improve? What's a safety hazard? But then what are the things that we're going to need to fix that don't need to be today, but that are going to need to be done in 10, 15 years? There were retaining walls that had been buried under construction items for 30 odd years. It took me forever to clean out the garden. I mean, and I'm just like digging and I'm like, let's just throw dirt on top of it because I don't know what I'm going to find if I keep digging. But they were just retaining walls not taken care of. There's a porch and just the support beams need to be replaced. It's not going to fall down, but it is something that if I was going to make this a much nicer property, that does need to be replaced. The driveway definitely needs to be repaved. Things like that, that aren't security measures or safety measures. We fixed all of those things, but there were just things, it's just an older property that just wasn't well taken care of.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be trying to analyze that one was really kind of coming to what can we do to make this livable? Clearly, that's first. We did negotiate that they were supposed to clean out the property.
Yes.
So
well,
at least we weren't
as an investor. Sometimes you don't have to. So
I would have, but here was the problem. We explained to them at one point, cool, you can leave all this stuff. And I was like, I'll go get a dumpster and, for 15 grand, I could probably get this place cleaned up. Oh, no. What do you mean you're going to pay people should be paying you to take this stuff?
Like you're selling it?
I was like, dude, no one's going to buy a hammer that's rusty and that's been sitting outside in the rain for 30 years. Like those aren't, but to them, they were prized possessions. So anytime someone talked about throwing something out, it became like an argument. So they needed to, they removed the items. They didn't throw them out. They actually relocated their items to another place. So we had to figure, so that was a very different deal. And this is why, I think it's hard to talk about analyzing deals in just these very strict numbers. You really have to look at a property and figure out what are the things that are going to need to be done first versus what are the things that can kind of be done over time. Once again, paving a driveway, we didn't need to do that. We needed to get up and livable for tenants to be able to stay there if they did, or to be able to get new tenants in. So as I mentioned, there were 4 units. The people on the bottom agreed to stay and took a rent increase. So we kept those tenants.
What was the rent before? What was the rent before?
It was $900.
That sounds cheap for New York.
It is, which is why we raised it to 11.
I was going to say, what'd you raise it to? But even 11 sound. How big are the apartments?
It's probably about 1,000 square feet.
Okay, that still sounds cheap.
It still is cheap, but we didn't want to empty the building. We also didn't want to kick people out of their homes. Yeah. If people wanted, and this couple, they take such good care of their apartment. They are fantastic tenants. They keep this place so clean. They even will clean some of the common spaces because they were just like, nah, I thought I could. They decorate. They're fantastic. So we didn't really want to scare them away. I would rather have great tenants for $100 less a month than to have to find new tenants and not really know how that was going to go. So those tenants stayed. The first floor apartment needed the kitchen. It's the complete 1990s, those really old, placard, cabinets, it's horrible. But we had a tenant that lived in the duplex with us that wanted to move out and live by himself. So he was willing to move across the street, but he wasn't making the income to be able to pay a 1-bedroom by himself. So we said, let's make a deal. You're a single guy and you're 25. How much do you care about a kitchen? I don't care about a kitchen. Great. We'll give you the 1-bedroom apartment. We're not going to update the kitchen for at least a year, and we'll give you a discounted rent on it. Perfect. Not a problem. Worked out really well. So we got him in on day 1. Day we closed, he moved in the next day. So now we got that tenant on the second floor. The third floor, actually the sellers, that little old lady, she stayed there for about 3 months after closing because they were not ready to be able to move into another place. I do not recommend that. That was horrible.
Did you have her pay rent?
No.
While she lived there?
No, we couldn't do that. That was kind of just a condition of buying the house, was that she would be there the 3 months rent free. So she got to live there, but they were also finishing up the clean out of all of these items. Yeah. So okay, kind of made sense. But then we were also making improvements, and that really kind of just was a conflict. So my favorite phone call about this house was right after we closed. So we closed, it was actually the first duplex that we bought. We bought May 22nd, 2018. We bought the quadplex May 22nd, 2019.
Oh, okay. So a full
Exact
year.
same day, exactly 1 year apart. But my husband and I got married on May 12th. We closed on the house on May 22nd, and then we left for our honeymoon May 23rd. So that top apartment, that fourth apartment, was the only one that we needed to completely renovate. It needed to be completely done. Well, we were going on our honeymoon, so we closed in the afternoon, got our demolition guys in, started doing demo in that apartment that day, went to Home Depot at like 7 o'clock the morning of our honeymoon, walked around picking out fixtures, and then left our demo guys there and left and went to our honeymoon. So, and they're calling and like checking in with us. And like, meanwhile, it's completely like pitch black where we are. And they're like, what's going on? Like, why aren't you guys turning a light on? And we're like, well, it's 2 o'clock in the Maldives. So, like, sorry, the lights aren't on. But they called us one day being like, hey, the little old lady is like freaking out. And we were like, why? Like, what are you doing? So since the house had so much stuff, accoutrements, we'll call them, around the entire house, but we needed to get it rented. I needed something to distract people's eyes away from
all that stuff.
all this crap. So I had the guys paint the front door fire truck engine red.
Oh,
right. So as you're walking up, all you look at is that door, and you don't see all this garbage. So she freaked out and starts throwing a hissy fit and called our realtor saying, hey, she painted my front door red. And my realtor was like, it's her door though. It's not your door anymore. So it did make it very difficult trying to understand where those lines were of the updates that we were now making, because it was almost like we were telling them that they weren't doing things right, or that they weren't, that they weren't giving people really a great home to be able to live in. Yeah. So that was an interesting few months.
So I have a question on here, and I'll put it up. How do you obtain mortgages for these properties, 1 or 2 homes? I understand, but how do you get it over and over again? And I know it's different when you have 4 and under. I mean, I think it's doors. And then once you go and you have 10, past 10, it's a whole different type of loan and deal. It's like commercial. So can you kind of talk about like how you got approved for this? Because it doesn't sound like a whole lot of rent was even coming in. And, I'm assuming you had 20% down that you had to pay and all of that. Can you talk kind of a little bit about the financing for it?
Sure. So with the first duplex, we were able to do owner occupied financing. So that one we did a conventional loan, and that, once again, back to house hacking, we only had to put down 5%. You can actually we went with a conventional loan, which is why we did the 5%, but you can also use an FHA loan, which is 3.5%. So to be able to kind of get into the game, there's not that big down payment. So that's a great way to be able to start. Then at that point, once we bought that duplex, we actually didn't have to, we were living for free. We already had the mortgage covered. So if you go to New York.
I was going to ask you that too, is if the other people were paying your full mortgage.
Exactly. Yeah. So now for a New Yorker to have no rent payment, that is huge. That just opens up a whole world of what you can do with being able to save money and what we were able to roll into the next one. So that was how we were able then to save up the money to be able to buy that second one, is we were living rent free.
Yeah.
So that made a huge difference for us there. So then we were able to get that second one. The second one, yes, with that rent, that's actually the cheapest apartment in that one, that 1100 one, because once again, that's the basement apartment. So when you add all those up and the parking lot, I mean, you're talking a 5-figure rent roll there, gross. So that does make a difference.
But were you already? Wouldn't they calculate what the rent is when, like, what she had it as?
So yes, she did, but since the tenants, so that didn't make a difference for getting approved for the mortgage, because we did not know if tenants were going to be staying or not. So our mortgage broker, and this will happen, I see a couple of people asking in the chat about that too. When you have one property and then you're going to buy the next, you have to give your mortgage broker the leases showing what those properties are bringing in. So that way it doesn't count against your debt to income ratio. So if I went to go buy a second property, and I would have to show for the first property what the rents were to then show that I'm not paying that full mortgage by myself and that I am locked in at that certain rate. So for the second property, for the quadplex, what we were able to do was to use what the projected rents were by using the comps from the area.
Okay.
So we were able to show, okay, well, the other properties, that basement apartment, once again, it's a basement apartment in New York, that's definitely gonna be the cheapest. It was also 1 bedroom. The others that were 2 bedrooms that were also gonna be renovated, we're then gonna be able to dictate a higher price. So I think our highest rental in that is almost $1,800 a month. So when we were able to show, well, these are what the comps are, this is what these apartments are gonna go for. And also here's what the rental income is gonna be from the parking lot. That made it much easier because our mortgage broker knew that we weren't gonna have to come out of pocket at all for that second property.
How much,
same thing.
and did you have to calculate the income from the parking lot, I'm assuming?
Well, when we did that, it was actually included in what the apartment rents were like. They didn't look at that. The mortgage company would not look at that as a separate entity. They weren't going to say, hey, what does a parking spot on this area go for? And you can rent it to neighbors. They looked at it as this is now an added value to the apartments for the people that are going to be living in this quadplex.
Okay. So, and I have,
sense?
Yes. And I have someone else, they said, I work full time and mortgage my flips, but can't imagine being approved for 3 to 5 mortgages. But that's basically what you were saying is the income from those properties, basically it's a wash. So if you're approved,
no, they're all cash flowing.
No. I mean, the reason why you can have 5 different mortgages is because of those incomes from those
yeah. Oh, I see what you're saying.
It allows you to be able to be approved for that because it's actually income.
Yes, people always worry like, oh, well, since now I have this mortgage, it's going to hurt my credit or now be to increase my debt to income ratio. And you're right, Katie, it's going to be a wash because let's say your mortgage is $5,000 on a property, but you have $5,000 coming in from income and rent. It's a wash. That does not affect your debt to income ratio. So that's why you need those proof of leases for you. And then also, yes, your credit does take a little bit of a dip right after you close because now that loan is now attached to your credit. But in a month, it usually comes back up. So as long as you're paying your mortgage, you're perfectly fine. But that's why it's also one other reason why people need leases, because your mortgage company is going to need that to be able to show that you have that income coming in.
Yeah.
So you're right. It ends up being a wash with the income coming in versus what you have to pay in the mortgage.
Are you guys using the same lender for all of these, or have you had to use different ones?
We use different lenders. I use a mortgage broker. So we've been placed with different banks at different times. So, and then the last one we did, we just closed on the duplex, like we were talking about at the beginning of this, on September 30th. That one also, as people were kind of talking about, when you can only get 10 mortgages. Well, that one now, since it was a smaller property, we were able just to put that one, we bought that without having my husband on that property. Okay. So then technically now we can actually buy one more.
Yes.
Because then we could put one in his name, one in my name. So I always recommend to people too, to make sure if you don't have to use you and your partner's name, don't
do it.
Nope. It'll just kind of make that easier to kind of down the line.
I have heard that before too, because after 10, it changes and it's a commercial loan and you just have to do things differently. And correct me if I'm wrong, but when you do the commercial loan, you can is it like a line of credit where you can just add everything on to one loan, or is each house an individual loan?
No, so you would still have it as an individual. You would still have it separately, unless you were trying to like refinance and end up doing something kind of along the lines of like a portfolio loan, where then you wanted to kind of like group your assets together, then you would kind of do it that way. But otherwise, if I was just going to go and buy a place, if I was going to buy it as an LLC, like to start out with, if I was going to buy it and it was going to be over the 4 units, or once again, if I'm now buying it over the 10 mortgages that I already have, then yes, then I would end up in that situation of having to buy it as a commercial loan. And then I would buy it, that one entity, that one building there. And then the next building I was ready for, I'd have to do the whole process all over again, just as you would for a personal mortgage.
Okay, so we have one question. Does the property still cash flow annually after real estate taxes, other expenses, and also including depreciation?
Yes, I do. Actually, I know Belle. So hi, Belle. So yes, actually they do. That to me is the most important thing. I always look for cash flow. That's what I want. I always explain to people too, my goal is not to own all of the real estate. I actually don't think I will end up buying 10 properties because that's not my goal. My goal is to get the most amount of cash flow with the least amount of properties. Right? So I look for the most amount of cash flow, right? I would rather one roof, one driveway, one set of tenants for the most amount of money rather than a ton of properties, because it's not what my goals are, right?
Yeah.
My goal is to make the least amount of money with the least amount of headaches. So right? I think that should be everybody's goal.
Yes.
But I'll speak for me personally. But so yes, so the property still does cash flow. We always, once again, also buying in New York, you have to take taxes into consideration. The property that I just bought, the duplex that I bought upstate, it's actually one of our cheapest properties, but the taxes are as if I was living in Manhattan. They happen to be in a really, really great school system. So the taxes are actually more than what the mortgage payment is. Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
I mean, we in Texas, like we have high taxes, but that's just because of how we are. Like, but that I could not imagine.
Yep. It was kind of, you have to consider your taxes, your homeowner's insurance, all of those, you have to factor in those costs. But no, that's how bad the taxes are in the place that we bought. But once again, even with that, we are still cash flowing $500 per door.
So the thing that I had a hard time grasping was, let's say, I don't know how much your duplex was, but the ones that I looked at in DC, and I keep going back to DC because that's the only thing I know how to compare it to.
Yeah.
These houses were like $700,000, and I could not understand how the mortgage payment and everything and the taxes and the insurance and just what the rent was, how people could afford to buy a $700,000 house and make the numbers work on that. Is that kind of the same thing where you guys are?
Yeah, New York is very much that way. You have to sift through a lot. You really do. You have to know what's going on in the market. You have to sift through in different areas, even in New York. Once again, I was struggling in the Bronx trying to find a place, and that's exactly it. We were looking at duplexes for $600,000, $700,000, $800,000. And then, you cross over to Yonkers, it was more affordable. Our first duplex was about $500,000. So still a good number, but you have to know kind of where you can kind of go for that. So I still always give props to my realtor for explaining like, hey, you go 10 minutes up the road and that's going to be a completely different kind of area. So I do find, and for our first deal, and I do recommend this for people, especially when you're trying to get started with house hacking, because that is a place you're going to be living in as well. That's why you need to have a good realtor. You need to use these experts. I also kind of like, I don't want to buy all the houses. I also don't want to know every single thing about real estate. I want to know all the people that know everything about real estate.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Like, I would rather be like, oh my God, I need help with something. Let me call Katie, than be like, oh, let me pull from my own mind with the other millions of things I got going on in my day, what that one piece of information is. I'd rather just call you and ask you. Yeah. So I think it's really important to have that networking piece and to use the experts. That's why they are there. That's why they are licensed. Not only your real estate, your broker, your agent, whoever you're working with, but also you need the right attorney. You need the best title company. I learned my lesson on that one. You need to find those experts around you, because that's really the people that you're going to have to rely on. And when you're buying a house hack, which is, once again, we all know is an incredibly popular way to get started. And most people will kind of end up staying in that like 1 to 2 rental properties. Once again, they're not looking to own the world. When you're looking to buy those, when you're looking to just buy 1 or 2 kind of places, you really need to make sure you have the right team around you and the right types of experts. And that's who's going to kind of lead you to the right well, if you look in this neighborhood compared to this neighborhood, or hey, go a little bit farther north, or maybe you need more of a class B neighborhood versus a class A. People are so afraid of New York or DC or California, and I get it. Places are incredibly expensive, but they also command higher rents. Right now, with what's going on in the pandemic, I would probably say things are a little bit inflated in our areas. So I think it's even harder to kind of get a deal in those specific areas, just because a lot of people are moving. There's a very big shift. There's a very big unknown. I do think things are a little inflated because of that. But 7 months ago, I would have told you there's nothing that's stopping you from buying in a high cost of living area if that's what you want to do. You just have to put in the work to look and to find the right place. You have to kind of wait and get all your ducks in a row, so that way when you find that cash flowing property, that you're ready to move on it, because those places are not gonna sit and last long in the market at all.
So what technically for you is a good deal? I know I hear a lot of people talk about the 1% rule. Do you go by that, or do you go by a certain amount of money that you're cash flowing?
Sure. So I take all of those things into consideration, but I take them all with a grain of salt. So when I am bored and just scrolling through properties that either my realtor sent to me or on, Zillow Realtor, whenever I'm daydreaming, that kind of thing, I automatically have the 1% rule in my head, just because that's the easiest snapshot it is for me, just to say, do I look into this more or do I not look into this more? I do not say, oh no, didn't hit the 1% rule, I can't buy this property. I do not do that, but it gives me at least like a little snapshot for it. But what I always try to, so that's usually a start from there that I will kind of just keep in the back of my mind. I personally, once again, I look for cash flow in my properties. I do have a number in my head that I try to look for in a property, but if it's, $50 less, I'm probably still going to buy it. Like it's still close enough to what I'm looking for. So that's why I kind of said at the beginning of the call, I think it's really important to keep your options open. Like I said, I bought the first duplex and then was looking at a state. And then all of a sudden the house across the street popped up and fell into my lap.
So cool.
That was amazing. Then recently, so I promised my husband I would not buy a house in 2020. I told him I was not going to do it. I was like, that's it. I'm not going to buy a house. We're going to save in 2020 and we will buy.
It's fine. I said, just don't tell him. It's fine.
He doesn't need to know. No, exactly. So we had no intentions of buying. We were going to use 2020 to be a saving year, to then be able to buy once again, to buy a quadplex, for $1 million, take some time to save for. So we were going to wait and buy and save until 2021. But what happened with the pandemic, I realized that a lot of people were kind of moving up the line and prices were just getting inflated. So I didn't want to wait till 2021 to see what was going to happen. So I switched my process and said, okay, let's go buy a little bit farther north outside of New York City, because I have the feeling people are going to want to live where there's a little bit more space. So I started looking up there, and my conditions for buying that property were completely different to usually what a lot of investors look for. One, I wanted a place that was perfectly turnkey. I wanted to be an hour. I knew it was going to be an hour outside of my house. I didn't want to have to go up there to meet contractors or get estimates or paint things or fix little things. I wanted it perfectly in order. And two, I also wanted to inherit tenants. That's something that a lot of people tend to be scared about, especially during the pandemic when you can't evict, or at least you definitely can't still in New York. But people really didn't want to inherit. People normally don't want to inherit tenants, and they definitely don't right now. I actually wanted the opposite. Those are my parameters for buying this place during the pandemic, because I really just wanted a place that I was going to go, get to the closing, and get paid a check. I got security deposits and rent when I closed, and I have now 2 tenants that are perfectly in place. We closed on September 30th. Not only did I get paid for their rent for the day of September 30th, but then I had 2 new tenants send me money the exact next day. So to me, that worked for my strategy, but I had to keep my options open.
Did you have to do anything different for the financing aspect of that because it was the pandemic?
So that I had to put down 25%. No lender, especially when I was looking to get pre-approved back in, what would that been, May, somewhere around May. Oh, please, no, nobody was giving. The banker that I talked to that was like, oh yeah, my small local bank could do 10% down for an investment property or 20% down. All those people were like, no, Becky, we cannot help you. Call us back. No, we're not doing anything. We're not doing business with you. So I said, okay. So we did have to put down 25%. The other thing that I actually was not expecting that did become a problem, this is where, once again, my realtor was like, I hate when your name pops up on my phone. So what happened here was, since we were buying in a smaller town upstate, the buildings department could not handle the request from title companies for the buildings reports. They could not handle the request from title. So now we got held up because we could not get the title report completed, because the buildings department that had, 2 employees that had to switch shifts because of COVID, because they both couldn't be in the office at the same time. We only had one person working, so it really slowed down that process. So that did end up delaying our closing quite a bit. But otherwise, from a lending perspective, everything else went smoothly. Oh, the one thing that I will say that did get changed on this one was right when we finally got that last piece of paper I needed from that buildings department. The lender I was using through my mortgage broker were actually capping the amount of closings that they were doing a day. They were doing so many closings and giving out so much money that a lot of lenders have actually kind of limited how many closings they're doing per day. So we actually had to get on a waiting list to be closed. And it took us 2 weeks to get to our turn on that waiting list.
Oh, I don't think it's been like that here. But I know that New York has been so different with
It might be in New York or that geographical area, just because once again, I am 10 minutes outside of New York City. We bought an hour north of the city. They are being just flooded with so many people that are looking to move out of the city.
So has the fact that you guys can't evict in New York, because you can't evict at all, like nothing, okay? Because it's a little bit different here. So you could evict, and then they came back and they said that if they aren't paying, they have to prove that it's because of COVID.
Yes.
And then you can't evict, but you still can, as long as it's not from COVID.
In some states, that's the CDC regulation. So that's who's saying if it's a hardship due purely because of COVID, and there's an affidavit that needs to be signed by the tenant confirming that and then presented in court, then yes, you cannot evict them. But in other states, yes, you can still evict for other reasons. In New York, not only can we not evict for anything right now, but even if there was an eviction case in process prior to COVID, those are actually all halted. So if you did not pay in May 2019, and then we finally got to eviction and we were in the process of court, and then all of a sudden COVID happened in March, that means that you are still living there and that case has not been resolved.
Has that affected you at all?
Personally, no. I am very fortunate. We've had fantastic tenants. Out of all of our tenants, we had one tenant that was out of work. And I just have to say, I cannot tell you how impressed I was with him. He was, once again, the 25-year-old guy. He's a bartender. We were not exactly, we kind of said to him, we were like, we can't even come up with a repayment plan because we don't know how long this is going to last or how long you're going to be out of work. And he would update us all the time on what was happening with his unemployment claims. As you know, many people were not able to get unemployment checks for such a long time. He actually, one day, he just sent us like $832.43. And I was like, what are you doing? And so I wrote to him and I was like, why did you send me this? And he goes, well, I got my stimulus check. And out of the $1,200, I spent $200 on food, $100 on electric, whatever the numbers were. And he goes, I literally sent you every penny I had left. And I was like, that's so sweet. And that's what he did the entire time and paid us back.
When you screen your tenants, do you think that the fact that you haven't been affected by the eviction process and COVID is because of how you
No. Of how I screen? No, I'm going to answer that no. Because we had tenants from 2 years ago that my screening process now is on point and perfected. And I know what I'm doing. But 2 years ago, my tenant process was not that way at all. So we've had tenants living with us that like, yeah, no, I probably know, like I am just really, really blessed, like, because no, this could have been a lot worse. I think what's really actually helped us is complete communication with our tenants. We are always available. We are friendly with them. We try to still keep those professional boundaries. We don't want to cross those, but like we're still nice to them, and we talk to them, and we listen to their concerns, and we try to do what we can to make sure that they have a great place to live and a nice home. And I think when you kind of come from that good place, like you're kind of matched back with that.
Mm-hmm.
We had one tenant that almost ended up getting in that would have been a complete disaster. And that actually happened right before COVID. What happened with that? We had our one bad tenant that we did not like. He had a great credit score. He had a fantastic salary, but he just was not the brightest human. And he just really kind of created a lot of difficulties for us. I will leave it at that. So he actually ended his lease early and left, and we were looking for somebody new. And we found this couple. My husband and I both really like them. I love everybody. I'm one of those people, like when I meet you, I'm like, you're my bestie. I totally trust you. Like you need to borrow $5. Yeah. My husband is not that way. My husband, he's much more introverted. He's quiet, and he like really reads people. So we'll like screen people, because in New York, you couldn't use a realtor to screen people. You couldn't have a realtor do an open house. So we had to actually do this screening by ourselves. Usually we do use a realtor just to be sure of fair housing laws. So we met this couple. We love them. Even my husband loved them. Normally my husband's the one that I'm like, oh my God, they're like going to be our best friends. And my husband's like, they're horrible. No, like we can't have them move in. And I'm like, okay, I'll have to rent him out to people to help people with screening tenants. But he actually liked this couple too. So we liked this couple. They filled out all the paperwork. They had everything. We checked references. We did our due diligence. Like everything sounded great. And then all of a sudden they were supposed to move in. We were doing the final walkthrough, and we thought it was really weird that because they were moving in that day, that only the woman came and not the husband. So we were like, okay, like, where's he? And she was like, oh, he didn't want to come. And we were like, all right. And she had her car filled with stuff, but didn't take anything from the car. So she came inside, but she brought a folder with her. We were like, all right, why are you bringing a folder? Like, grab your toaster oven. Like, why are you walking in with a folder? So we go upstairs, we do the pre-move-in check-in. And then right at the end, she goes, oh, so just so you know, sorry to drop this bomb on you now, but my husband didn't want to come because he has this health concern. He has this health issue. He didn't really feel comfortable talking about it. So he has an animal that helps him with this. So I was like, okay, but like she kept saying this animal, and I was like, well, you haven't told me what this animal was. Like what are we referring to? So of course it ended up going along the same lines of that ESA pit bull.
Mm-hmm.
And we explained to her, we were like, well, like I need to talk to my insurance. Like you hadn't brought this up, you hadn't mentioned it, you haven't given us any documentation. Like we clearly have no problem if that's what's needed, but we need to kind of check this stuff. So we walked out, and luckily I still had the keys in my hand. Thank God, Katie, I never handed her those keys.
Did she already sign the lease?
She did sign the lease. Okay. So we walked out, and I knew the entire time in the back of my head that my insurance does not allow pit bulls. Also, once again, I work in the medical field. So the documentation that he actually gave me had improper numbers on the license from the doctor. And I fortunately just happened to be able to recognize that because I know the New York State codes, and that was not a New York State code that was on that paperwork. So either way, I was like, okay, let's go and kind of look at this. And thank God the new attorney that I work with answered my phone at like 9:30 on a Saturday morning. And I was like, kind of, what do I do? And fortunately, I have a clause in my lease that says that if you lied, misled, or misdocumented information on your application or your pre-screening questionnaire, we can actually terminate your lease for that. So I explained to her, unfortunately, you misled, not saying you lied, but you misled information and filled it out incomplete. And unfortunately, we're going to have to end the lease here. And she clearly wrote me back a very scathing email. And she also explained that she was going to call the police on us, was going to come live in the apartment, and she had planned on living there and never paying us rent because she knew in New York during the pandemic that they never had to.
She wrote that to you and said that that's what she was going to do?
Yep. Yes, she did.
People. I don't understand. I don't understand people.
So the police did come and knock on her door. They did. And we explained the entire situation, and the police officers were just like, yeah, like that's not fair. That's not nice. They shouldn't be allowed in your house either. So, so we were like, thank you.
Wow.
And my favorite part, one of the police officers was actually the police officer that was at our house when it was vandalized.
Oh, did he remember you guys?
Of course. Of course he did.
Oh man. Okay, so I know that you have a Facebook group and you coach on rentals. Can you kind of tell people a little bit about that, and then how they can get a hold of you as well?
Sure. So I at the beginning of the pandemic, we're all quarantined to our house, and I really was just going through, once again, the story that I just told you that happened at the beginning of all of this. And I think my husband was just tired of me talking about real estate all the time and trying to figure out what we're going to do with our next property. So I was like, fine, I'm going to go make friends on the internet. So I started a group called Lady Landlords that really helps women kind of talk about going through what situations are with tenants and what they are specifically more with rentals, and how to do the buy and holds and how that situation goes. So I always tell people I did it for completely selfish reasons. I really needed a place to ask my own questions. And I started that, and we've just really kind of taken off from there. So now I have just really create resources for the group that they're looking for. Kind of same thing, Katie, what you do. You know, we kind of listen to what people are asking for, and we say, okay, well, let's see what we can kind of do to help and give back. So that's what we're about. So you can find me either in my Facebook group, Lady Landlords, or you can find me on Instagram at Becky Nova, my name, 24. And then lastly, I also have a YouTube channel called Live Free with Becky Nova. I do 5-minute videos about just different topics, just like really great ways to get like quick answers to things to be able to kind of like move on, but are still comprehensive.
Yeah.
So those are the best ways to find me.
Perfect. I thank you so much for doing this. Oh, we didn't even talk about, I guess we did kind of in the beginning, but the house that you have in the Dominican Republic. And I know that we've kind of talked about this before in the group, and I definitely want to do something that is not in the United States. Like I want to, or like vacation type homes that are on islands. Like I want to do a video.
That's my next one
as well. Yes. So
that's my next property is definitely that. Like I said, that's that beach rental. I already got plans for it.
I'm already jealous. I'm already jealous of it. So
I'm telling you, come on down.
Well, thank you for being on here, and hopefully we can have you back sometime soon.
Yeah, anytime I can help. I have no problem hopping on.
Okay. All right. Thank you, ladies, for joining us. We had a good group on here today, and if you guys have any questions that's after the live, put them in the comments, and we will go through and answer them. Actually, Becky will go through and answer them because I don't know, and I don't want to inform anybody wrong. But if you guys have any questions, just put them in the comments.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.